Good morning, Christchurch. It is wonderful. I'm thankful to Lynn for an opportunity just to share a little bit from Scripture with you all today. So we are continuing with our series of events throughout Scripture that features a well or a spring, some kind of water. I love that idea, and there is no shortage of those. So today, we're going to have to do Old Testament because I just love the Old Testament, and I am just so excited to share with you. We're going to look at one event, but it's two kind of episodes, so we're getting two for one. Two little episodes that go together involving two characters that maybe have been a bit forgotten. Maybe forgotten by us, maybe just kind of lost in the story, all of that. And perhaps you haven't given them much thought ever or in a while also. And so in this, we are still going to see how does this tragic story actually show God's provision and his living hope and the hope that he's giving to these characters in the story and also us. So we're going to get there, but let me start with a personal story, kind of set the scene. Before I came to Kentucky and to work at Asbury, I was teaching at just part-time at a community college in Mississippi. They offered 2 Bible intro courses, even though a community college is not a faith-based institution whatsoever. And so it was really interesting because you had all sorts of students who are just looking to finish a degree or to transfer somewhere where that was required. Many of them were not believers or have a particular faith. Many of them really didn't know major characters or events in the Bible, okay? So I'm teaching, but I'm actually encountering questions and observations through fresh eyes because these are sometimes students who have never heard the stories that you may be familiar with. And so it prompts some interesting questions. Well, we had covered just a very general sweep of kind of the Abraham narrative. Abraham, the father of our faith, Sarah, Isaac, the promised child, the near sacrifice of Isaac. Where are we going with this, with the covenant? And I thought when we got to that, where God calls Abraham, sacrifice your son, your only son, and then he stops him. I thought surely that's going to be the hard one. That's going to be the point where we stop and I have to really take some time and we got to sort through it. That's usually where we stop and talk. So I, kind of pause. Any questions? What are we thinking? And someone kind of slowly raised their hand and said, "What about Ishmael?" And I said, "Well, what about Ishmael?" Nobody asks about Ishmael. I certainly don't. And someone else said, yeah, remember there's Ishmael. That's his son. And what happened to him and his mom, Hagar? And I thought, wow, these characters are the forgotten characters and God provides for them. And I was the one who had kind of forgotten them. They're not the major players in the story, right? So I was looking at big picture, but I thought how nice it was for them to actually prompt me to start and take another look and say, what is God revealing about himself through this episode, through these minor characters of Ishmael and Hagar in this whole narrative? So God provides hope for them. We're going to look at 2 passages. It's not so much about them, but it is about God. It is about them, but it's about how God reveals himself, how God works in their lives. What stands out to me throughout multiple times through this Abraham, Sarah, Hagar, Ishmael, Isaac story, over and over again, almost in a cycle, it's that God sees, God hears, God provides. Sometimes Old Testament uses the phrase God remembers. So remembering is actually providing. I also teach Hebrew at Asbury, and so I love looking into these nuances of these words in the original. So think about it. God sees, he hears, he provides, he remembers, he responds. You could put a bunch of different words there, and altogether it attests to living hope that God gives. So if you're not feeling especially sharp on your Genesis 16, 7 through 14, Hagar, Ishmael story, don't worry. We're going to fill in some gaps. I want to give you a little context, but we're also going to read the passage. There is no quiz after. Travis may have asked. No quiz, don't worry. So let me back up just a tiny bit, just so we're all on the same page. Okay. Abraham, I'm going to call them Abraham and Sarah. They actually get a name change. They were Abram and Sarai, and then they become Abraham and Sarah. We're just going to go with Abraham and Sarah just for simplicity this morning, for continuity. But here's the scenario. They are childless. God had called them from this Mesopotamian region to move all the way to the Canaanite region. And he said, I am going to make you a great nation. I'm going to bless you. There's going to be a whole nation from you, my chosen people. The problem is they did not have children. This is a problem. Ancient Near Eastern culture, especially Old Testament culture, the way society works is founded upon family units. And so these family units are central, not just for love and encouragement, but for lineage, heritage, inheritance, laws get built around this, all sorts of things. So when Abraham and Sarah are 80 plus years old, and God says, I'm making a covenant with you. Through you, there will be so many descendants. You won't even be able to count them. And they're saying, we don't have any. Haven't you noticed this? We just don't have them. And God says, no problem, you will. Okay, but this is not an immediate thing. I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, I'm sure they were amazed, confused, shocked, not sure how this would happen. But this is not an immediate fulfillment. Years and years and years are going by. Well, Sarah and Abraham, but Sarah apparently kind of comes with this idea and says, you know what? Yes, God has blessed us. We're going to take Hagar, who is our maidservant. So some translations say slave, some say servant, some say maidservant. The particular Hebrew, she is a foreigner, she's an Egyptian, but she is working for the household. So she has a certain amount of rights, just in terms of societal laws, but she doesn't own property, as you can tell. She comes as a single woman in a foreign land. So she is working in the household. Sarah says, all right, Hagar, you and Abraham are going to have a child, and then we are going to raise that child, and he is the fruit of God's promise, that kind of thing. What could go wrong? Right? What's wrong with this plan? In case you're wondering, because that is a peculiar response, is it not? It's a bit peculiar. However, there is actually an ancient Near Eastern precedent or context for why that decision was made. It's not the right decision, but they didn't just invent it one day. We have royal records from across the ancient world, especially royal families that couldn't have a child would do this. And essentially, it was an arrangement of surrogacy. And so it appears that that's what's going on here. It's an attempt for that. And Sarah and Abraham think they can help God along with his miracle. So Hagar conceives, and in this, we're not told the specifics, but in some way, she's provoking Sarah, maybe taunting, maybe boasting, we don't know. But she ends up then, in turn, getting really mistreated by Sarah. You can imagine this awful tension going on here. To the point, this treatment was so bad that Hagar runs away with nothing but an unborn child. What a mess is this? Where is the hope for Abraham and Sarah? Where's the hope for God's promise and the fulfillment of this promise? And where is the hope for Hagar in this, who really has nowhere to go? Our first passage is Genesis 16, and I'm going to read it, but I may just narrate just a tiny bit along the way. Starting with verse 7, the angel of the Lord found her, Hagar, by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from? Where are you going? She said, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said, I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, now you have conceived and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael. I'm going to tell you, Ishmael literally means God hears. For the Lord has heard or given heed to your affliction. He will be a wild donkey of a man, and his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall live at odds with his kin. We're not really getting into that part today, although I'd be happy to have another conversation with you about that. So she named the Lord who spoke to her. She named the Lord. She responds with, you are El Roi, which is literally God who sees, or a seeing God. For she said, have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him? Therefore, this well, so she's now kind of at a well, will be called Be'er Lahai Ro'oi. And the literal meaning of this is the well of the living one who sees me. Beautiful. And it lies between Kadesh and Fared. Okay, and so Ishmael is born, Abraham's 86, she's back in the household. What intrigues me so much about this portion of the passage is actually that we get that much information about Hagar. and Ishmael really, they are not the covenant bearers. They are not the ones we're going to talk about, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and future generations. They're not the ones. This could easily be a footnote. This could be a sentence. There was strife, she ran away, she came back. Like, it could just be end of story. But instead, God chose to demonstrate his love for these people in this passage. He wanted future generations to know he is a God who sees, who hears, who provides. And especially the name, Ishmael. So many characters in the Bible have dubious names, and you think, well, surely it will be this one. No, he gets a good name. It's God hears. Yes, it's a good name. And God says, I hear you. I see the situation. This was not my plan, but I see you. This tells us far more about God than it does about Ishmael or Hagar. It tells us more about God than it does about Abraham and Sarah also. So we have this seeing, hearing, providing, right? Abraham and Sarah, they are brokenhearted being childless. They are devastated realizing their lineage will not continue. And even Abraham pleads with God, could it be through Ishmael that your promise is fulfilled? And God says, no, that's not what the promise was. And so they are still waiting with their prayers, and God heard them and provided a way, even though the timing was not at all what they expected, probably not what they hoped for either. So the Lord sees Hagar and her unborn child in this very difficult situation. He sees her mess. Most of it she did not initiate. She didn't cause. She responded to it, but she did not initiate. Sometimes the mess just happens to us. It lands on our lap. Sometimes we are the ones messing things up. And the Bible is clear that there is hope. There is redemption. Hagar's hope is not in the fact that she's carrying Abraham's child. She's not going, okay, I'm going to cross my fingers and hope I just get to live here a bit longer and hope everything works out. Her hope is not, maybe Sarah will treat me better when I return, but rather she says, I have encountered God. I have encountered the living God. And in fact, he is the one, this living waters, this God who sees me. Now I can return. Now I can continue with my work. And so she does that. Our second episode, we're gonna skip just a couple chapters, and we're fast forwarding 14 years, because this is where Hagar and Ishmael kind of get brought back up in this narrative format once again. 14 years on, Isaac has been born. Yay! The promised child has been born. We're told that he's at the age where he's been weaned. Scholars like to say probably somewhere between 2, 3-ish, could be even up to 4. But the celebration they're doing is precisely because he survived the dangers of infancy, right? This is ancient times. Infancy, mortality was a big issue. And so there is a huge celebration when a child reaches that kind of age where they feel like they've made it and they're more steady and they can eat food and that kind of thing. So they're doing this. It should be wonderful. And Sarah oversees Ishmael, who's around 14 years old. And he's either teasing, he's laughing at Isaac, he's poking fun. We're not told precisely what it is, but it's something that has a little bit of a jab to it. It's not like they're laughing together. It's like one is laughing at the expense of the other a little bit. And so she sees that, and she's just furious again. And she immediately is like, oh no, they have to go. Like, they just have to go. And so she tells Abraham that, and she says, I want them gone. They cannot be here. They need to be removed and forgotten, and we need to kind of move on. Have you ever felt forgotten? Have you ever felt left behind, left out, pushed to the brink? Here's one story of a different kind of forgetting. One time when I was an undergraduate student at university, it was a Hebrew language class. We entered the classroom, sat down. We're just waiting there. This class had a really formal and strict environment. The professor just chose to take that kind of heavy-handedness to the approach. So we're all a little tense when we're waiting. There's this countdown, 5 minutes go by, and then we start kind of looking around going, he's always on time. 10 minutes, and we start getting a little bit hopeful. Maybe he's not going to come. 15 minutes, he's not here, and we say, let's call it a day. We are out of here. Well, we left, didn't think anything of it. We found out later he was actually there. He just forgot. He forgot us. He was in the zone, and he just totally forgot and actually wished that we had come up and got him. And we were actually okay with being forgotten. This was we liked being forgotten kind of day. We were happy with it. We had simply slipped from his mind. All right, that's clearly not the case with Hagar and Ishmael. This is not the kind where you're like, I hope they just forget about me. Well, I don't want to be forgotten if I'm not being provided for. And so you have this situation where Hagar has to know that this is a tense situation. She's living it. But Abraham is really troubled by this because this is his son too, right? And he's thinking, how do I send them away? And he talks to God about it. And God says, they cannot coincide here because it is through Isaac that the inheritance will come. It is through Isaac that the covenant will be fulfilled. It is through Isaac that this multitude will come. But I will bless, I will provide for Ishmael. I will provide for Hagar. And so you are to send them away, but knowing that I am the one who will take care of them. It's not going to be you anymore. This solution is not just difficult, but I want you to imagine the kind of risk it poses to Hagar and Ishmael's lives. Literally. Outside of being part of a family unit, where's your place in society? You don't have that. They don't have governmental systems. They don't have housing available. They don't have food banks. They don't have churches. They don't have any of these things. She is a foreigner, we're told. She's of a low status in society. She owns no property. She's unmarried. They are now out in a desert, in a wilderness, and all of these odds are stacked against them. Where are they going to go? Even if she says, I'm going back to Egypt, how? On foot through a desert? So imagine facing dehydration, impending death. You're not going to survive very long in a desert with nothing. And so we're told, it gets to a hard passage, she realizes, they're kind of in process of dying. It is dire, and she leaves Ishmael under a bush, realizing he is dying, and she moves away because she cannot bear to just sit there and hear him and watch him, and she knows that's going to happen for her as well. And so she and Ishmael are crying out to God. Enter our next passage, Genesis 21, starting with verse 17. And then God heard the boy crying. The angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said, what is the matter with you, Hagar? Do not fear. Don't you like how God always says do not fear when it's clearly a dire moment? But he says, do not fear. God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Arise, lift up the boy, hold him by the hand, for I will make a great nation of him. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well. We're back to our wells again. A well. And she went, and she filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy, and he grew, and he lived in the wilderness. He became an archer. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him in the land of Egypt. Essentially, a pretty happy end to what was a very, very hopeless story, a very bleak outcome. They did not just survive the day, but God actually provided for both of them for their lifetime. This is essentially the end of the narrative we get about Hagar and Ishmael. We get a few other references and some genealogies, but in terms of the story part, the narrative, this is what we get. God sees and hears and provides for them. Who is this God who is giving covenant through Abraham for the redemptive plan for humanity? But he sees, cares, and loves the minor characters in the story. In fact, they're not just minor characters, but we might even see them as obstacles to the covenant, perhaps the result of Abraham and Sarah's disobedience. This is a God of mercy, of love, of redemption, and hope who cares. Yes, the God in the Old Testament is full of love and mercy and redemption and hope. Jesus' words in Matthew 10, there's not one sparrow that will fall to the ground apart from your Father. And even the hairs on your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. You are more valuable than sparrows. We are his image bearers. He sees, he hears, he provides living hope for his image bearers. That includes Ishmael, that includes Hagar, that includes us today. What is your takeaway from this account? I want you just to pause for just a moment and think. Do you see yourself somewhere in the story? Do you see yourself feeling like you have been in one of these places? Maybe not this exact place, but one of these characters, one of these situations. Have you felt something that they may have felt? Have you watched someone that you love be in one of those situations and you think, this was not the plan and there is no hope? This account is not just about the information of two characters in a bigger narrative, but truly teaches us about who God is. And he is the one who inspired this to be written down. It's not just an event that happened. It is to be written down and told from generation to generation. He did not forget Hagar and Ishmael. He does not forget us today. Is there a time you've ever felt overlooked, and perhaps even by God? Isn't that a painful feeling? If you think, has he forgotten me? Has he heard my prayer? Why does it feel like he's listening to everyone but me right now? I have no doubt that Sarah felt that Abraham felt that, Isaac felt that, Ishmael and Hagar, everybody felt it. I suspect many of us have felt that at some point too. And so this is something to remind us. This is a concrete event that happened that we can say, look what he did. He didn't fulfill things in the way we thought he would, but God provided. The provision here is in that living water, the promise of his presence. And so for those who have been forgotten, mistreated, fallen under hard times, are oppressed, are unfairly acted against, those who are suffering, God sees. He sees, he hears, he provides. And as Hagar recognizes, so may we also recognize that the Lord is the God of the well of living waters, who sees me, who sees us too. So let this account be a reminder of who God is and the hope that he gives us. I'm just going to close with a prayer, and I think the band is going to come back up for one more song. Jesus, we thank you for your goodness, for the love and mercy that you have lavished on us, and we thank you that you have given us such concrete, tangible reminders through these accounts of what you have done in the past and what you continue to do today. You see and you hear, and you do not forget us. You give us living hope. You are the way, the truth, and the life, and we give you thanks for that today. Amen.